Hello and welcome everybody to the 13th edition of Chennai Storytelling Festival. This is the second week of the festival, and as some of you had just seen, we had just wrapped up one workshop and we are now moving on to the storytelling for adults. We have a series of 12 of these 2-hour sessions across the edition, and today is the fourth one. And today we have storytellers from India and mostly from the USA. So let's jump right into the storytelling. The first storyteller for the day is a very good friend of mine, Shraddha Nigavekar, and she's from Pune, India. Hi, Shraddha. Welcome to the Storytelling for Adults. Please fully introduce yourself and share a story with us.
Thank you so much, Pratigya. And thank you to Eric and his team and the entire Chennai storytelling team for this wonderful festival that you all are pulling off year after year. It's incredible. Thank you. A very short introduction. My name is Shraddha Nigavekar, and I'm a storyteller from Pune, India. And I've been a storyteller officially for the last 4 years. And I'll just end it with saying that you can find me if you search Google for Shraddha, or if you search for KBSSS, which stands for Katha by Shraddha or Story by Shraddha. And I'll just end it right there and jump right into the story because I'm excited to share this story with you. All right. So here goes. The name of my story is Lamb to the Slaughter, and it's a slightly adapted version of Roald Dahl's short story. When the night has come and the land is dark and the moon is the only light we'll see, no, I won't be afraid. No, I won't be afraid. Just as long as you stand by me, stand by me. So darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, won't you stand? Stand by me. Stand by me. She hummed and she sang as she worked steadily with her hands. The room was warm where she was sitting, and the 2 table lamps were lit, one beside her and one opposite, next to the sofa, the empty sofa chair opposite her. The curtains were drawn. The sideboard behind her had crystal glasses, some lemon water, some soda water, and some whiskey. Fresh ice in the ice bucket. Yes, Mrs. Mary Maloney was waiting. She was waiting for her husband to come home from work. And as she worked with her sewing, she kept glancing up at the wall clock, not with any anxiety or apprehension, but more to reassure herself that with every passing minute, it was a minute closer to the time when he would come home. And when it was 10 minutes to 5, she stopped humming and singing, and she started to listen. And soon enough, punctual as always, she heard the car tires screeching to a halt on the gravel outside the window, the car door opening and slamming shut, and familiar footsteps walking past the window, and then the key in the lock. And she put aside her sewing with a smile on her face, and she stood up and she went to give him a kiss, welcoming him inside. Hello, darling. Hello. She took her coat and his hat. She took his coat and hat and she hung them on the stand right next to the closet. And then she went to the sideboard and she started mixing a couple of drinks. A strongish peg for him with a couple of ice in there, and just a lemon soda water for herself. And she handed it to him and she sat back in her sofa chair. Now, Mary, she was a sight to behold. Her skin was translucent, beautiful. She had this glow about her in this, her 6th month of pregnancy. Her eyes, normally beautiful, were even more beautiful because there was a calmness, a tranquility of sorts that had settled around her. And her eyes looked larger and darker and stunning. Her dainty little head bent over her sewing was a beautiful sight to see. And she loved this time of the day, this time of companionable silence. When he sat in his chair with his first drink, she knew that he wouldn't want to speak until he had finished that drink. He was, after all, tired. She knew that. She loved the way that he came in. She loved everything about her husband. The way he walked across the room slowly but with large strides. The way he sat loosely in his chair. His imperfect mouth. The lovely nape of his neck. His warm male embrace that kind of reached out across the room to her and engulfed her with love. She loved every bit of it, and she loved the silence. And the only thing that you could hear was the ice in the glass clinking across the sides of the glass. And then suddenly, he did something which was unusual. He picked up his glass and he drained it in one swoop. Although there was a large bit of drink left in there. And then he made as if to get up and go fix himself another drink. And she said, I'll get it, darling. No. And she sat back down. And he went and fixed himself another drink. And when he came and sat back down, she saw that it was a much stronger drink because of the richer amber gold color in his glass. Much stronger peg. Tired, darling? Yes, I am quite tired. I think it's a shame that, being a policeman as senior as you, they make you still stay on your feet the entire day long. You've made detective finally. They shouldn't do that to you. He kept sipping his drink. Should I get you your slippers, darling? She said, glancing up from her sewing again. No. And he kept sipping his drink, the ice clinking against his glass. Should I get you some cheese and crackers? No. Well, I haven't fixed supper. It's Thursday. We go out on Thursday, so I haven't fixed anything for supper. But if you want, if you're tired, there's plenty of meat in the freezer. I can whip up something in a jiffy, and you don't even have to move out of the chair, darling. I don't want anything. Well, let me at least get you cheese and crackers to keep you going. And she made as if to get up. Sit down, he half shouted. And she was startled. Very uneasy, she sat down again. Just sit down for a minute. And she just stared at him. Mary, there's something I have to tell you. And there's no other way. I thought about it a lot, but I have to tell you, and it's better to tell you right away. So I'm just going to come straight out and tell you. It's going to be a bit of a shock, but really you can't blame me. What is it? What is it, darling? What's the matter? And he told her. He told her. It barely took 4 or 5 minutes. But those 4 or 5 minutes, for Mary, she kept sinking deeper and deeper into shock. Every spoken word, she could see her husband drawing away from her with every spoken word. Away and further away and further away till he was out of reach. Shock just washed over her. She couldn't make sense of it. And then she whispered, let me at least fix supper. Wait, won't you? Don't you understand? Don't you understand that you will be taken care of? And of course, the baby too. I'll pay good money and make sure you're taken care of, and the baby. Of course. Just, Mary, there shouldn't be any fuss. It's not good for my job, you see. And Mary stood up. And without a word, she left. And he didn't make any move to stop her. She almost floated across the room, her feet barely touching the ground. She couldn't feel anything, not physical, not emotional. She was in shock. She opened the door to the basement and she went down the stairs. तेरे बिना जिया जाए ना, तेरे बिना जिया जाए ना, बिन तेरे तेरे बिन साजना. She went downstairs to the freezer. She opened the freezer. She was on automatic mode right now. Put her hand inside. Caught hold of the first thing that came in her hand and pulled it out and looked at it. Something was wrapped in paper. So she pulled the paper off. It was a leg of frozen lamb meat. And she held it with both her hands, a thin portion of the bone. She held it with both her hands and she walked up the stairs again. And she walked into the living room on her way to the kitchen. And she saw him standing by the window with his back turned towards her. And he heard her come in. And he said, "Don't you understand, Mary? I don't want you to fix me dinner. I'm going to step out. I've had enough." And Mrs. Mary Maloney stepped up behind him. And without a second thought, she lifted up that leg of frozen lamb and she brought it down. Crash on his head. And then she stepped back. She might as well have hit him with a steel club, a heavy steel club. And he just amazingly stood there and swayed for 4 to 5 seconds before he crashed down to the carpet, all twisted. And she just looked at him, that ridiculous piece of meat still in her hands, held tightly. So I've killed him? I've killed my love? Well, suddenly her thoughts were crystal clear. She was the wife of a detective. She knew very well what would be the penalty for this crime. And she was okay with it. She didn't care. What was life without her love? She didn't want to live. But then suddenly, she thought. She put her arms to her side, holding that lamb and looking down at her belly. What about the baby? What about the baby? What did they do? What did they do to murderers with unborn children? Would they kill her and her baby? Or would they wait for 9 months? And then what would happen? And Mary did not know the laws. She didn't know that law. How would it deal with her? And she definitely did not want to find out. So she made a decision. She quickly went into the kitchen, pulled out a pan, threw that piece of leg of lamb in there, opened the oven, turned it on, shoved the pan inside and shut the oven, and then rushed upstairs. And she fixed her hair. She sat in front of the mirror and fixed her hair and powdered her face and touched her lips. And then she looked at the mirror and she tried to smile brightly. Hello, Sam. The voice sounded all wrong. She tried again. Hello, Sam. Can I have a can of peas and some potatoes, please? Didn't sound quite right. And she kept rehearsing. She kept rehearsing until it sounded normal. Her regular voice. And then she rushed downstairs, picked up her purse, and she walked out of the kitchen, out of the back door, out of the garden, and into the street, and down to the corner grocery store. The bell rang as she opened the door. Clink, clink. Ah, hi, Sam. Her brightest smile. Oh, hello, Mrs. Maloney. What can I do for you? I just want to pick up some potatoes and a can of peas, please. Oh, for sure. You see, Patrick, we go out every Thursday for dinner, but he came home and he was so tired. And I said, Patrick, just sit in that chair and I'll fix you some supper. Oh, do you need some meat then, Mrs. Maloney? No, Sam. I have a lovely leg of lamb cooking in the oven right now. Just the peas and the potatoes, please. And what are you going to give him for his dessert? Oh, Sam, I totally forgot about dessert. What would you suggest? Oh, Mrs. Maloney, we've had this cheesecake come in just today. It's fresh and it is delectable. It's delicious. Why don't you take him a large piece of the cheesecake? Oh, he loves cheesecake, Sam. Perfect. Yes, please wrap that up too. And as the peas were being wrapped and the potatoes being wrapped and weighed and paid for, she shot a furtive glance around. There was no one around. She plastered that smile back on her face and received the package from Sam. Said, oh, thank you, Sam. I'll see you soon. Oh, bye, Mrs. Maloney. Thank you for stopping by. And then as she walked home, back to her garden gate, she kept thinking, Mary, all you're doing is you're walking back home with the vegetables and dessert, and you're going to fix supper for Patrick, your loving husband. That's all you're doing. You're walking home to fix supper. That's right. That's right. Just keep walking. That's all you're doing, Mary. Just keep everything normal. And if you were to find anything unusual or out of the ordinary when you get home or quite tragic, you will just react naturally. That's right. Just be natural. There's no need to act. You're just going home to fix supper for Patrick. And she opened the kitchen door and she put the parcel by and she started singing, stand by me. Stand by me. Hey, Patrick, I'm home. Hi, darling. And she opened the kitchen door. Stand by me. Ha, ha, ha. Just as long as you stand by me. And she saw him. She saw him lying there in the living room with his legs doubled up under him and his arm twisted behind his back, broken. And she went into shock. Real despair. Patrick! Oh my God! Oh, Patrick! And she fell to her knees by his side, shaking him. Oh, Patrick! What happened? And the tears welled up. All the love for him welled up. Oh my God, Patrick! Oh no! And then she rushed to the telephone and she knew the number of the precinct, the police station, by heart, and she dialed it. Hello? Yeah, this is... Patrick's dead! Patrick's dead! Come soon! Come right away! Who is this? I'm Mrs. Mary Maloney. Mrs. Patrick Maloney. Patrick is dead! Come right away! Patrick? Detective Patrick, you say, is dead? I think so. We'll be right there, Mrs. Maloney. The police car came very soon. And she opened the door when they rang the bell. And there was Jack Smith, Detective Jack Smith, and Detective Bob O'Malley. She knew all the men at the precinct. They were all friends of Patrick. And she fell into Bob's arms, sobbing. Oh, Bob! Patrick! Where is he, Mrs. Maloney? And they went right away to check on him. Is he dead? I'm afraid so, Mrs. Maloney. What happened? And she told them how she had just stepped out to the grocery store and she came back to find him like this. Until then, Jack had put his hand behind Patrick's head and felt the congealed spot of blood. And he showed it to Bob. And Bob went right away to the phone and he called for backup. And they arrived soon. There were several more officers, several more detectives, a fingerprint analyst. They all flooded the house. They sat Mary down, gave her a glass of water to drink, and said, "Tell us from the beginning what happened." And she did. She told them how Patrick had come home and he was so tired, so they decided to stay in for dinner despite it being a Thursday when they usually went out. But she was caught at home without any vegetables because she was not planning for supper. So she had just put some meat in the oven and went out to the corner grocery store to get vegetables and came home to find him like this. Oh, Patrick. It's okay. It's okay, Mrs. Maloney. We'll find the person who did this. Which grocery store did you say? Oh, Sam's grocery store around the corner. And immediately Bob made a sign to another detective who left the house, who came back after 15 minutes with a whole bunch of notes, and she could hear them whispering in the distance. She was all cheerful, all happy, making supper, peas, potatoes, cheesecake. I don't think she could have. I don't think so. Oh, Patrick. And Bob and the rest of them searched high and low. They said, the doctor said, that he had been hit with a blunt instrument, probably metal, something really heavy, and they were looking for the weapon. Because, of course, who would be carrying this heavy weapon out and about? The man that killed him probably took it away with him and probably just threw it in the garden or hid it at home somewhere. And they searched. They searched high, they searched low, but they couldn't find the weapon. And they kept saying, "Oh, we find the weapon and we have our man. We find the weapon and we have our man." But there was no weapon to be found. And hours, they searched for hours. And the next time Jack walked by her chair, she reached out and said, Jack, could you fix me a drink? A light one. It may help me feel a little better. Oh, of course, Mary. And he fixed her a drink. And she took a small sip and said, Jack, why don't you fix yourself a drink too? And for the others, y'all are working so hard. But you know, it's not proper. It's not allowed, really. But it's so late. Maybe we will. And they all were persuaded to have just a nip of whiskey. And they stood around her, all awkward-like, not knowing what to say, trying to console her in bits and pieces. When suddenly, Jack Smith rushed to the kitchen. And then he rushed back saying, "Excuse me, Mary, but the lamb is still in the oven. Do you want me to turn it off?" "Oh, my dear, of course. That's right. Please turn it off. It's probably done by now. Turn it off." And he did. And then just as they were finishing their drinks, Mary looked up at them and said, "Would all of you do me a favor? It would mean so much to me." "Oh, we'll try, Mrs. We'll try, Mary. We'll try." "What is it?" "Well, all of you are here working so hard. Such good friends of Patrick. He would never forgive me, God bless his soul. He would never forgive me if you were in his house. It's so past supper time, and I left you hungry. He would never forgive me if I didn't give you a meal. Please, would you eat the lamb? It would be such a big favor to me. Please." "Oh, we possibly couldn't. We couldn't. Oh, I couldn't eat any of it. I was making it for him. I couldn't possibly have a bite of it. Please, it's a favor to me, please. It would make me feel so much better. And I know that's what Patrick would have wanted." And that was the clincher. They said, "Okay." And they shuffled off to the kitchen. And they took out plates and they brought the roasted lamb out of the oven, set it in the middle, and started carving it and eating it. And between mouthfuls, she could hear them. She was still sitting next to the lamp, next to the sewing in her sofa chair. And she heard them through mouthfuls. oh, this is quite delicious. Oh, no, I was so hungry. I'm so glad she asked me. But I know, Charlie, but it's a little awkward, isn't it? Eating the lamb, which is made for Patrick. It's just, and they were whispering, and they talked about the weapon that they couldn't find. The weapon. I don't know where it was probably a really big metal club or some instrument. Where could it possibly be? We've looked everywhere. It has to be on the premises somewhere. That's right, Charlie. Jack, do you want this last piece of lamb? Oh, I wouldn't mind. And Jack took that last piece of lamb and he shoved it in his mouth and he said, Bob, I bet it's been under our noses this entire time. Oh, that was good. Oh, and he burped. And there, in the living room, Mrs. Mary Maloney started to giggle. He did stand by me. Oh, yeah, he did stand by me until he was dead as can be. And that was the story of Lamb to the Slaughter.
Oh my. Such a wonderful choice of story. And I love the way you were pacing the entire story, how it started with a more relaxed, casual kind of an expectation of a regular life, and how there was a sudden information coming across, a shocker, her singing, and the jovial life, and how the twisting and turning amazingly brought across Shraddha. Thoroughly
Thank you,
loved it.
Pratigya.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Opening it out to the audience.
It's a wonderful read too. I've adapted it slightly, of course, for the telling, but it's such a wonderful read.
I felt that. I could see that. I could feel that through your
Yeah.
telling that it must be an interesting read. As I was telling you the other day, I've not read much of Roald Dahl adult books, but this is
Right.
an indication.
There's a whole
that
bunch of
got
short
time.
stories for adults by Roald Dahl, and they're all amazing, each one of them.
Now I'm inspired to try them. Opening out to the audience, yes, anybody wants to share anything?
Shraddha, you kept the thrill going on till the end with all those props and actions, voice modulation, above all singing. Just loved it.
Thank you, Nina.
Even
Thank you.
just feeling the goosebumps even now that last time when she's giggling, that the suspense of that evidence missing and they eating it up. Thank you.
Thank you.
That it was right under their nose all the time.
Yeah, under their nose.
David, yes, please go ahead.
Shraddha, thank you so much for that. It's absolutely an absolute. Oh, what a fantastic retelling of that story. It's actually a story that I know incredibly well. I've taught that story to so many learners of English over many years. I've probably taught it 100 times, so I know it like the back of my hand. And I've never actually even considered retelling it as an oral story, but you performed it. You executed it with every beat, every step of the way of the story. I was waiting for the words, and he told her. That simple phrase, and he told her. It's, absolutely phenomenal storytelling. And it made me laugh so much as well, the way you told it. It was such an entertainment. And it's kind of typical Roald Dahl adult fiction, isn't it? It's beautifully wicked story. Brilliant. I loved it. Loved every moment of it. I'm so pleased to hear you telling the story.
Thank you. There's something else I'd like to share, actually, is when I was preparing to tell the story, did a little bit of research. Apparently, the idea of the story came to Roald Dahl at a dinner that he was having in Vermont with Ian Fleming, the James Bond person. And apparently, they were served some lamb, which was extremely dry and terrible to chew. And Ian Fleming whispered to Roald Dahl, saying that this leg of lamb must have been in the freezer for 10 years. It's frozen solid still. And that's what sparked the idea, and it went on to become this story. So that was an interesting bit of a backstory.
Thanks for that addition, Shraddha. That was fun to know. Pri, you want to go ahead?
Shraddha,
Hi, Pri.
hi. The visuals created were so crisp that all I want to do is chew on some lamb. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. How sweet.
Yes, Niana Tobin, you want to go ahead?
Yes, I love your singing. It's so
Thank you.
beautiful. It's a sort of warm way to come into the story. Thank you.
Thank you, Niana. Appreciate
Shraddha,
it.
if I may.
Yes,
Pratik.
Veena, please go ahead.
Hi, Veena.
Shraddha, what I can say, it was engaging, it was gripping, it was thrilling. And
Thank
you know, when you were telling me the story, I remember there was a Hindi movie which I saw.
Really?
Same story, yeah, depicted
Same
on this
story.
story. Yes, this story. Yeah, there was a very short movie. Then I suddenly realized, oh God, and I do know the ending. But I must say, what a wonderful narrative. Your expressions, your telling and singing. Oh God, you're too good. And
Thank
you
you.
captivated us from the first moment. The
I'm so
background at the
glad you
back,
all liked
the
it.
setting. Really, Shraddha.
It
Thank
was,
you so
thank
much.
you so much. I'm so glad it worked well because, like you said, David, I've read this as a youngster growing up. I read this story a while ago, and then I've reassociated or was reintroduced to it pretty recently. And I remember that I loved the story the first time I read it, and I was like, "Can it be told? Can it be told?" This is the first time I'm telling it. I'm so happy that it was
Yeah.
received well. So thank you.
Emotional trauma of a wife, what she goes through, and ultimately to the
It's
extent of what she might
right.
she
And the
can do.
beauty of the story that Roald Dahl has written is he doesn't say exactly what is being shared by the husband to the wife. He just says, and he told her, as David said. You know, it's not in so many written words. So the reader has to make the connection with with the other context.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
The choice of songs, oh my God, and the way you were chewing. So good.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Veena.
Rachel, you want to go ahead?
A wonderful telling of this story. You were so expressive and you captured every emotion so fully. And
Thank you.
at the end, you were laughing the way you had her be sort of hysterical and pleased. There was such a mix of emotions. When she talked to the policeman and said, "Please do me the favor," there was irony there and a double meaning
Yes.
as to what she said. So it was such a pleasure. You captured the theatricality of it and the range of your emotion, the range of your voice. It was perfect.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, Shilpa, please go ahead.
Shilpa.
Yeah, hi Shraddha. I think most of has been like said whatever I wanted to tell you, but it was amazing. You kept me hooked till the end. And when you giggled, I was all smiles. Oh wow, what a beautiful narration, beautifully expressed, and the songs which you wove in between, they were lovely. Thank you so much for
Thank
this
you,
wonderful
Shilpa.
story.
Thank
I
you.
have read the story and amazing. Like you have done full justice to the story. Lovely.
Wow.
Thank you.
That sounds so good to hear. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
know doing justice to a Roald Dahl story is not an easy one, and I
Yes.
love what Shilpa said.
I
Yes.
was scared. I'll say that much.
No, no, no.
For sure.
It was amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, any other thoughts? Yes, Deepa, please go ahead.
Meanwhile, I'm just missing the first few minutes, like first 1 minute of your story when you started. And since then, it's like going on and on in my mind. And right now in the chat, David and I are discussing what exactly were the words he would have told his wife that drew her to such a pain. It
I'll have to
was
go back and read.
amazing. And it was like mind blowing when I said, you're narrating the story in English, and all of a sudden a Hindi song comes, and it fits so well. So, masta, in short.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Deepa.
Adding to what Deepa said, was there a reason behind bringing in an English song and a Hindi song? No,
So-
that's not something that comes normally to us. I don't know. I mean, is there a reason why you chose two
Right.
different
So my
languages?
mind thinks in both languages, right? And
Of course it
and
does.
I loved the Stand By Me song in the beginning because she was so in love with her husband, and that's all she wanted was for him to stand by her, and that's what she lost. You know, and then for me, the pathos of of losing that love of yours in whichever way, that brought on the other song, is Bin Tere, Without You. So I couldn't find an English equivalent which would be suitably rendered in my voice. So I went with Hindi.
Good choice, Shraddha. I think with that, we'll wrap up Shraddha's telling and her feedback. We'll move on to our next teller for the day.
Thank you.
Thanks once again, Shraddha. We have Gerald Fierst from USA. Let me spotlight you, Gerald. Thank you so much for joining us, Gerald.
Hello.
Please introduce yourself fully and share a story with us.
Oh, terrific. Well, my name is Gerald Fierst. I'm in Montclair, New Jersey, just outside New York City. And I tell, I tell folk tales, personal stories. A great many of the folk tales. As a matter of fact, now I have a one-man show called Maybe I'm Crazy, Maybe I'm Not, which is all about the power of the traditional story to set our own course of life. And that probably is the one of the stories that I include in that one-man show. The finale almost is this traditional Jewish story of the Baal Shem Tov, Israel ben Eliezer, Israel the son of Eliezer, who is known as the Baal Shem Tov, the master of the good name. He was a healer who would travel from town to town, and he would tell stories, and the women and children would gather, and they would, many men would mock him, saying, all he does is tell stories. And he would say, but if the women listen and teach the children, then the stories will live and change the world. He believed that singing and dancing and telling stories would carry our voices up to God. And there are many stories told about the Baal Shem Tov. When Israel was a small boy, he was left an orphan. And kindly Jews had taken him into school, but he wasn't interested in study. Instead, when the teacher would turn away, the boy's eyes would wander out to the window, to the fields and the trees, and he would slip from his desk and run out the door. And the teacher would have to go and get him and pull him back and sit him down and say, look at your books. But as soon as the teacher would turn away, well, then the boy would slip out from the desk again, out the door into the fields, until at last the teacher said, let him go. And so it was that the boy Israel went to live in the wild places. He slept in the mossy banks. He ate the berries from the bush. And he listened. He listened to the song of creation. He listened to the birds and the animals. And he learned the language of all the beasts and birds, the insects. And all nature loved him so. It was his fate, though, to return to the world of humankind. When he was 13, he returned to the little village of Rundaka. And there, they gave him the job of leading the children to school. But he did not take them directly to the school. Instead, he led them into the fields. And he showed them how to weave garland flowers for their hair. And he took them into the forest. And they took the branches of trees and waved them like flags above their heads. And they sang and they danced. And their voices rose up to heaven. And the Messiah, the Mashiach, he whose time has not yet come, he rose up on one arm and said, "Is it time then? Is it time?" And Satan, the devil, seeing about to happen which should not be, went before the throne of the Lord, went before God and said, "This boy makes happen what should not come. Let me go and strive against him." And God said, "Strive." And so it was that the devil came down to the surface of the world, looking for some way to harm the boy Israel. He went to the insects, he went to the birds, he went to the beasts, but nothing would turn against the boy. But there was a woodcutter that lived not far from Harundika, who was cursed with a terrible curse. He had been born without a soul. And at night, when the moon rose high, hair would grow upon his body. He would fall on all fours, and he would run across the fields, a wolf. And the villagers would shut their doors and lock their shutters tight until at last at dawn, the werewolf would fall underneath a tree and return to human form. And that is how Satan, the devil, found him. And the devil took his claw and thrust it into the chest of the man and pulled forth the human heart. And in its place, the devil put the heart of evil, that black heart that absorbs all light. And that day, when the boy Israel gathered the children to take them to school, as they went through the fields, weaving garlands of flowers for their hair, as they approached the line of trees where the forest begins, suddenly, the werewolf appeared. And the children screamed and ran. And when the parents heard, they said, "You may never go there again." But the boy Israel said, "It was only a wolf that ran from the trees, and it is gone." And the boy spoke with sincerity and purity. And the parents listened and said, "Of course, you may lead our children." And so he gathered the children to him, and he said to them, "Do not fear, but watch, and you will see." And so he led the children into the fields, towards the trees. And as they approached the forest, suddenly out from the trees came the werewolf. And evil had made it grow to enormous size. Its shoulders stretched from horizon to horizon. Bloody vapors issued from its mouth and its nose. Dark clouds covered the light of the sun. But the children did not run. They watched as the boy Israel marched forward into the body of the beast.
Wait, just a couple minutes.
And took the heart of the beast in his palm and pulled it forth. And when he held that dark heart of evil in his palm, that heart that absorbs all light, it fluttered. It trembled like a bird with a broken wing. And the boy Israel pitied that heart. And he understood that all the evil of the world is merely self-loathing. And he placed the heart of evil upon the surface of the earth, and the earth opened wide, and that heart sank deep, and then the earth closed over it. And it said that from that place, a sweet, sad song rises to this day. Now, it was the fate of the boy, Israel, to go forth into the world, to become the great master, the Baal Shem Tov. And when he left Harondika, well, the children became like their parents, with their eyes always cast down, never looking up. But you have heard the tale. I affirm. Go forth and sing your song. Tell your story. Listen to the song of creation, the song of life. And when you meet the monster, do not fear, but go forth and take the heart of evil in your palm and look and see. It is like a bird with a broken wing, filled with self-loathing. Sing your story. Sing to your children. Sing when you meet the monster, and your songs will rise up to heaven. Sing, for your song can change the world.
Thank you, Gerald. That is such a heartwarming story. And I love the way you just sat back, relaxed, and just sang your song. You know, or we tend to come forward and put in our emotions and do this and do that. And I love the way you just relaxed and beautiful. Loved it. Thank you so much for that sharing.
You're
Opening it
very
up to the
welcome.
audience.
Yeah, just as Pratikya said, it was so calm and relaxing. This way also storytelling can be done. So thank you so much for teaching us this, how to be calm and yet creating impactful storytelling.
Thank you.
Yes, Suzanne, please go ahead. Suzanne, you want to go ahead?
Hi, Jerry. It's Susan Stone from
Oh,
Evanston.
hello, Susan.
Hi, sweetie. Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
I loved the werewolf story, and I just want to say I agree with everyone. It was very present, and it was just good to see your punim, which means face, everybody. So thank you, Jerry. Be well, okay?
Well, great to see you.
You too.
Yes, it's wonderful, I have to say, this International Storytelling Festival, which I know Eric has created over years, is such a gift and so extraordinary. What an extraordinary mission he has been on. Really, I admire it.
I was surprised to see, Gerald, you were short of words. I thought you'd be filled with them. Marianne, you want to go ahead? Please do.
Yes, thank you, Jerry. That was a really very inspirational story. And it also gave me, it's a good story to give hope, especially in our country now. We need some of that. And, I just, it's a very, very good feeling when you hear a story like that. So thank you for sharing that. I needed it this morning. I really did.
It's hard to listen to the news lately.
Yeah.
Yes, Marianne. Tobin, you want to go ahead?
Yes, hi, Jerry. Thank you so much. I have two things to say. The hope and being able to take evil and give it compassion, I think is so, so difficult. And you opened up a door. You showed in action and in loving words an example of how to do that. So I think that that's so, so precious. And also, I love Baal Shem Tov stories. And the ones that I know are very short. And they're meant culturally, they're meant to be short so that they can be for non-literary people. And I love how you kept it short, but you wove in the depth and the meaning behind it. So thank you so much. And good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
If I were to...
And others might be interested also in the stories of Nachman of Bratislav, who was the Baal Shem Tov's grandson, and created a whole series of stories that are comparable to the stories of Hans Christian Andersen, one of the great original stories that have become folklore, using the same metaphors as folklore. Nachman of Bratislav.
Yes, as I was saying, to add to what Nayan was saying, you gave us a lot to ponder over. But more importantly, I think it also came with the understanding that it can be done in a very simple and easy way. I love the simplicity of just saying, just look at the heart and, give it your love, your empathy, and see what magic happens. And more importantly, look up and sing your song. I think that's my big takeaway, not just for the evening, but I think this is something that I would like to try and see how it works with me as a person. So thanks once again for that, Gerald.
Right.
Any last thoughts before we move to the next channel? Okay, all right. I think with that, we'll move on. We next have Maria LoBiondo from New Jersey again. Let me just find you, Maria, first. Maria, do you have your video on? Oh, you're right there. Thanks for waving out. That always helps. Welcome, Maria. Please introduce yourself fully and share a story with us.
So my name's Maria LoBiondo, and I live further south in New Jersey than Jerry, in Princeton, New Jersey. I realized listening to our first two tellers that there's some greater plan, some divine providence putting me now, because our first teller alluded to a personal inspiration for a story that led to what Shraddha told. Jerry told a folk tale, and what I'm going to try to do is an experiment of braiding a personal story with folktale. So kind of bringing those two together. I've been on a mission, so to speak, of trying to get across that folks and fairy tales are still relevant in today's world. And that was part of the inspiration for the tale I'd like to share right now. I was walking along my favorite nature path. You probably have a place where you like to walk to meditate, a place that's maybe green with trees and birds singing, some nice calming water nearby. The place I like to go is a canal path. It's a tow path that's very flat. At one point, mules pulled barges of goods along a man-made waterway, so it's very calm. And I like to go there as often as possible and just walk. And it was summertime, and I was walking along when what I believe is sometimes called a paper wasp, but we call yellow jackets, began to buzz around my elbow. Now, I didn't have any perfume on to attract it. I wasn't wearing bright colors, so it would think I was a flower. I didn't have any medicine for bee stings with me or anything like that, but it was swarming around my elbow, and I began to flap my elbow like, a bird, and began talking to it, saying, "Get lost, get lost." But the yellow jacket stung me anyway. I looked up, and only a few feet ahead of me was a couple walking towards me. The man was burly, he had a long beard, he was holding a blanket in his arms. The woman had a top knot, and she had a backpack on, and she had tattoos down the length of both her arms. I thought, they must think I'm crazy, flapping like a bird and talking to myself. So I called out in explanation, "I just got stung by a yellow jacket." The young woman called back, "Would you like a Benadryl?" That's the medicine you take when you have a bee sting. What are the chances of a perfect stranger finding you at just the exact moment and offering you exactly what you need in that moment? Flashback to several weeks before, I was on a different stretch of this same canal path. I accidentally stepped on a yellow jacket nest, and about 20 of these wasps came swarming out and began to chase me and sting me. They stung me on my head, on my neck, on my arms, on my legs. I went screaming to my car, and they followed me. They even got in my car. I put the windows down. I was yelling as I'm driving home and trying to swat them out of the car. I got home, I ran inside, opened up the medicine cabinet. No Benadryl. As I said, it was summertime. I knew my husband was at the community pool. He's always on his phone, so I quickly texted him, please bring home some Benadryl. Moments later, he walked in the door. He hadn't checked his phone. No Benadryl. By that time, I had red welts all over me where the stings were, and they were throbbing, and I was miserable. By the time I did get that medicine, it helped calm the stinging, but I have to tell you, it took several days before I felt normal again. So here I was on the canal again, not having any Benadryl with me, thinking that wouldn't happen again. I had never seen these wasps on that stretch of the canal. And I was stung again, didn't know how it was going to affect me. And here comes this magical helper who has exactly what I need, exactly when I need it. Of course, I said yes. And as I popped that little pink pill into my mouth, the young woman said, I also have bug spray. Would you like some of that? And I said yes to that too, and sprayed it all around. And then how to thank them? Well, seeing that the man had that blanket in his arms, I said, are you looking for a place to sit on the canal? And he said, yes, but where they liked to go was not available. Oh, I said, there's a place just up ahead, and it's perfect, and nobody is there. That's all I had. I said, thank you, I don't know how many more times. And then they went one way, and I went the other. And as I'm walking along thinking about this incredible experience, what popped into my head was a conversation I had had just that morning with someone who said to me that folk tales and fairy tales, they are no longer relevant in today's world. They don't matter. There's nothing in them for us today. Now, I've been telling folk and fairy tales for 30-some years, and I have to tell you that to hear that they no longer matter, quite frankly, it stung. And so I started walking along thinking, well, what just happened? Magical helpers. What folk tales and fairy tales do I know that have magical helpers? And the first one that popped into my mind was one you might know, The Princess and the Frog. The princess has a golden ball. She tosses it in the air. It falls into a well. And a frog, a talking frog, who's really a prince, pops out of the well and says, I'll help you for a kiss. And I thought, well, I don't exactly want to kiss a frog, but it would be better than being stung by 20 yellow jackets. And then another folk tale popped into my mind, Rumpelstiltskin. You may know that as well. The one where the funny little man goes to help the princess who has to spin straw into gold. And she's there and she has this big thing of straw, this big mound of it. And Rumpelstiltskin says he will help her. She gives a ring, she gives a necklace, but the third time she has nothing to give him. And he says, well, I'll help you if you give me your firstborn child. And I thought, I have a son and a daughter and a brand new grandson. He's not even a month old. And I would not trade them for all the gold in the world. So then another magical helper popped into my mind. It was a story I was just learning from Ireland. It's about a brave beggar lass, and she goes off to see how her two older sisters are doing. They've gone off to seek their fortunes. And she comes to a manor house to ask for a place to stay for the night. And the lady of the house says, you can stay if you promise to watch a corpse overnight. Because in that time and place when someone died, a body was laid out on a table and someone stayed with the body all night, the better to ease the soul from this world to the next. And so the lass says that she will. And she's sitting there by the corpse, watching it, and the clock strikes midnight. And the corpse sits up and jumps out the window. And because she says that she would watch the corpse, she jumps out the window as well. And the corpse leads her through a bog and through a cave and through a fiery forest and up a glass mountain. And how does she make it through all those adventures? Well, before she reached the manor house, she had a little half loaf of bread, and an old woman came by and said, would she share it? And the lass did. And the old woman said, for sharing this with me, I will help you whenever you need it. And sure enough, that old woman appears at each crossroads, even giving the lass a wet blanket to put over her head so she can go through the fiery forest and not a hair on her head is singed. And then I thought, okay, so those are all magical helpers in folk and fairy tales, but how do they matter to us now? And then the first thing I thought of was maybe something that's happened to you. You're in a restaurant. You have a sweater or umbrella on your chair, or maybe even your wallet or credit card on your table, and you get up to leave and you forget it. And someone comes running out to return it to you. Doesn't that seem like a magical helper? And I thought of something that had happened to me. Again, maybe happened to you. Your car breaks down by the side of the road and someone stops to help you. Well, I had two young children in the back of a car, and the car broke down on an overpass by a mall. Very, very easy to get rear-ended in such a place. And this was long before cell phones. And there I was in this car, and another car pulled up in front of me, and a woman got out. And as I said, before cell phones, her mobile phone was like this big. But she lent it to me to call for help. And when help came, she just got in her car and went on her way. Oh, that certainly felt like a magical helper. And then I thought of one more thing. During the pandemic, I read about in New York City how some people put refrigerators out on the sidewalk, and they filled the refrigerators with food. So if someone was sick and couldn't go to the grocery store to get food, they still would not go hungry. That seemed to me like magical helpers as well. But now, how to connect the two? What happens in folk and fairy tales and how we live today? Well, what happened in folk and fairy tales, a talking frog, Rumpelstiltskin, an old woman with a blanket, those all seem incredible. But what had just happened to me with that magic little pink pill seemed incredible as well. And so I concluded that folk and fairy tales help us to see the incredible things that can still happen for us, even now. It's all how we shape the narrative, whether it happened yesterday or once upon a time.
How interesting, Maria. This didn't just feel like a story, it felt like a complete workshop on braiding stories. Uh, takes me to Laura Sin's workshop that is going to be happening, the second part of it tomorrow about braiding stories. Um, as I said, not just one story, but you've given us so many more stories. And how true. We have these magical helpers all around us. And I'm sure you've triggered a lot of memories across the audience, and all of us would have one magic helper that we want to talk about. I'll open it out to the audience. Let's take in a few feedbacks before we move on to the next one.
Well, Maria and I are good friends.
Yeah.
And of course, you can see that we both think alike. And of course, I tell Elijah's stories, who is the magical helper, Elijah the prophet, who wanders the earth and comes in so many forms to remind us to be generous and give charity, and to test our goodwill. And I just love that story. I just love it. And I love the ending of the story.
Oh, thank you, Jerry. Coming from you, that high praise.
Whether it happened today or once upon a time.
To add to what you're saying, Gerald, we've always heard of stories that start with once upon a time. I've never heard one finishing with that. So you well pointed out. Thank you. Very beautifully done. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, Niana, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. I've been thinking for my workshop about how to be my own fairy godmother. And to reframe, I'll be doing it Sunday, to reframe a bad situation and make it good. But what I once you get that model, that idea that there are fairy godmothers around, I'm finding they're showing up, that there's more, universe is helping me out much more than I expected. And I had a flat tire this week, and I didn't have time to go call AAA and all that stuff. And the man in front of me, we went to the food pantry. He said, "Oh, you have a flat tire. Come to my house." He was 3 miles away. He had a pump. He put the air in my tire. The next day, I brought it to the garage, got the nail taken out. It was just so easy. And for something that usually isn't easy. So that was my fairy godmother on Thursday.
Wonderful.
But I think the more not to expect it, but to think, when can we do acts of kindness? And then we're the fairy godmother or father.
Wonderful, Marianne. Yep. Thanks.
Yes, Marianne, please go ahead.
Hi, I'm also Maria's friend. I live in Vermont now, but I used to live in New Jersey. But Maria, you're getting better and better and better at crafting your stories and braiding them together. That was the best version I've heard so far.
Oh,
and I love the way your mind works. I love the way your mind works. And it also, the older I get, the more I appreciate the idea that you should be kind to everyone you meet, and especially old people, because you never know. They could be a fairy in disguise.
That's right. Thank
you for the story, Maria. It was great.
Thanks, Marianne.
I love the thought of that. Yet another reason to help out, especially older people. Yes, anybody else?
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Maria. Thanks a lot. I think we'll move on to our next teller now. We have Elisa Pearmain here. Let me just spotlight you, Elisa. Yes, we have Elisa joining us from Massachusetts, USA. Elisa, please introduce yourself fully and share a story with us.
Hi, everyone. And I'm Maria. That was so enjoyable. And thank goodness folk tales are still relevant for that's what I'm going to be sharing today. And a quote that came to mind as you were talking was a quote by Ram Dass, who says that we're just guiding each other home, and that's our job. And it brings so much joy to the helper as well as those receiving the help. So you've filled me full. And yes, I am going to share one of my favorite folk tales, which we'll talk about afterwards. It's how it speaks to me right now in this crazy world that we're living in. Long ago, an old man and an old woman lived in the foothills of Korea. And their deepest dream when they were young was to have children, but no children came to them. But they had made peace with it and had learned to love what life gave them. But because they had no children, they had to care for themselves in their old age. And even though the old man's back was bent and sore, and his breath often short, he still climbed the path into the forest to collect firewood to sell in the village. And even though the old woman's hands were gnarled and pained, she still had to sew for the villagers and to work in the garden. But they never complained, and they were always kind to the others in the village, and they were well loved by everyone except perhaps their greedy neighbor, who disdained their house, which was, of course, somewhat falling apart at this age and stage. But they paid him no mind. Well, one morning, the old woman helped the old man on with his wooden A-frame wood carrier and kissed him goodbye as he walked slowly up into the forest to that place where he'd been cutting the day before. But indeed, his breath was short, and it wasn't long before he had to sit upon a log. But just then, a little bird came and lit upon a branch just above him and began to sing. Oh, my dear friend, I don't think I've ever heard such a sweet song, and I don't think I've seen you before, but you're lovely. Sing again. But instead, the bird flew away and up the path. Oh, you're going to make me follow you, aren't you? All right. And he got up and he walked a bit further up the path, and then the bird stopped and he again sat, and again the bird sang. My friend, you make me feel as if I were young again. It's beautiful. Please, more. But again the bird soared up the path until they came to the place where he had been cutting the day before. And he took off his backpack. But the bird kept going, and so he said, "Oh, just a little more. I must hear that song again. It is so moving." And he followed the bird up the path slowly and sat, and the bird sang, and then again it flew up. And again the man said, I feel like a fool, but I must have more of that song. Until at last they got to the top of the hill and began down a path. He said, "Just one more time, bird." But it was then that they came to the edge of a clearing, and he could see a valley stretching below, and there an outcropping of rock. And the little bird swooped and soared down to that rock and sat and sang until the man said, "Oh, all right, I'm crazy. I'm wasting a lot of time, but just to the rock." And he went and sat on the rock, and oh, what a relief. He said, "Okay, bird, now sing." But this time the bird didn't sing. it cocked its head as if listening. And then the old man heard it, the unmistakable sound of fresh, clear water burbling up from an underground spring. Oh, my friend, you know I needed water almost as much as your song. Thank you. And he knelt down and cupped the water in his hands and he drank. And then he cupped his hands again, but of a sudden he realized, I feel like I've had a little too much rice wine. I guess I better not have any more. And he said, I'll just rest here a moment. And he lay back against the rock. And soon he was fast asleep. And that little bird stayed by his side as the sun crossed over the sky and began to go down behind the trees. And it wasn't until then that he landed on the man's shoulder and sang and woke him up. And the man looked at the sun. He said, oh my gosh, I can't believe I slept all day. Oh, my poor wife, she'll be so worried. I've got to get home. And he jumped up and then he said, oh, I just jumped up. My back feels good. Oh, my knees. Wow, maybe I can even run back up the hill. My poor wife. And he did indeed. He took great leaps and strides up that hill and down the path. Just as the sun was going down, he came back to the place in the forest. And as though it were easy, he loaded up his backpack with the wood he'd been cutting the day before and threw it on his back with ease and started down the path. Meanwhile, his poor wife indeed had been frightened, but never had the old man come home later than early afternoon for his meal and his rest. And now it was dark. And what had happened? Was it his heart? Was it wolves? Oh, she was so frightened. She put on her shawl and she ran next door to the neighbor. She knocked on the door. She said, and a servant came. And she said, please, could you get your master? I need help. And the old man came. He said, what is it, woman? I'm busy. She said, please, my husband didn't come home from the woods. I'm so frightened something has happened. Could you lend me a servant so that I can go and maybe we can help him back? I cannot lend you a servant now. It is time for my bath and then I'll have my meal. Come back tomorrow. Tomorrow. Well, she knew she couldn't wait till tomorrow. So the old woman went home and she got a lantern and she put a large knife into her belt and she began to go up that path. But she hadn't gone far when she heard this boisterous singing, and coming down the path was a very tall man with her husband's A-frame on his back. She said, what have you done with my husband, you thief? He said, wife, it is me. What? She held the lantern to his face, and there was the face of the man she had known 50 years before. Husband, is it you? Of course it's me, wife. But you are young again. I feel young again. Well, and he told her all about the bird and the fountain, and he said, wife, this is wonderful. And he picked her up and he said, I'm young again. Never will you have to work. I will fix up the house, the new roof. I will take care of us. You will never have to toil again. She said, husband, that is indeed beautiful. But what will the neighbors say? Oh, of course, wife, how foolish of me. Tomorrow I will take you up to the fountain, and you too shall drink, and we shall start our lives over. And that's what they did. The next morning, he carried his wife on his back, and they climbed up the hill and down to the beautiful valley and down to the rock. And she knelt and she cupped her hands and drank. And then she slept. And all day, the young man watched as the sun crossed over the sky until at last it began to go down, and he saw that the years had flown away from her face. He woke her up, and they saw they were both young again. And she said, "My fingers, oh, they feel so good. Oh, I feel so great. Let us dance, husband." And they danced around the field, and they hugged. And the husband said, "This is wonderful. We will start our lives again." "Yes, we have a fresh start," she said. "And maybe this time," he said, we'll be lucky enough to have children." "We might, husband, indeed. But let us not forget the peace we found in our lives, accepting just what is." He said, "Wife, you've always been wiser than I, and it's true." And they went home, and they indeed started their lives over. They fixed the roof on the house. They tripled the size of the garden. And they began to go into town and do kind works more and more for the villagers. And it wasn't long before the neighbor noticed. And one day he knocked at their door. "I see that good fortune has shone upon you. Perhaps you could tell me your little secret, help an old man with a bad back and terrible knees." They said, "Of course." And they told him about the fountain. "Thank you." And he left immediately. Well, that night, as they were eating their supper, there was a knock on the door, and it was one of the old man's servants. He said, "Our master did not come home. He went somewhere today, and he never came home." "Ha," they said, "we know where he is. We will find him." And taking lanterns and knives, they headed back up that path, up to the top and down. And there in the moonlight, they could see the rock, and they could see something lying next to the rock. And the closer they got, they began to hear a sound like a cry, and they yelled, "Go, move off," thinking it was some terrible beast that was attacking the man, but nothing moved. And they went closer. And as they did, they heard an unmistakable sound. "Where? Where? Where? Oh, it's a baby." And they found in the folds of the man's clothes a brand new baby. They held it close, and they laughed. They said, "The old neighbor, he must have drunk too much." And then they looked at him, and they looked at each other. And at the same time, they said, "Can we keep him?" And they did. They kept the baby. And this time they raised him up with such love and care and such learning of kindness, such examples of kindness and respect for one's elders, that he grew up to be a wonderful young man, a wonderful man who cared for his elders until their very, very old age. And that is my tale.
A long, long story tugging at your heart and so beautifully told, Elisa. I like the idea of how you can rewind and make a fresh start. At times, just continue being the good that you are and get to something good if you were not earlier. I really love the story. I've never heard that before. So beautifully told. I also love the voices of the neighbor, especially. Oh, I totally loved his voice. Thanks for the story. Just opening it up to the audience. Anybody else wants to share anything? Please go ahead.
Well, let me just say first that I agree. It helps me to remember, when there are people who are just acting so unkindly, that we know that they had a bad start. We know that they did not have the love and the example and the care. And I think that helps me to have empathy, even when I'm mad at someone for their actions, to have some empathy that they're not, there's just no evil, it comes from somewhere. And I think that helps forgiveness a great deal. Yeah. And I that story came to me. A good friend of mine spent a year in South Korea teaching English, and she brought me back a book of Korean folk tales, and that one just stood right out for me. And then when I was traveling on the Camino to Santiago this last year, I met a Korean woman also walking as slowly as I was, and her English was great because she had lived in Boston for 3 years, and we shared folk tales. And she didn't know that one as well, but we shared the one about the man who ends up in the moon because he's so greedy, and we had a real time. The folk tales were what helped us make a strong connection, and we walked together for quite a few hours. So that's just a little background on that story. Thank you.
Elisa, I must add. Yes, June. Sorry, go ahead. Was that you, June? Go ahead.
I'm just thinking. I just missed the beginning, but it was so expressive, such lovely expressions. I immediately followed the story, and it was
Good.
so lovely to hear. It was, I mean, they're just in it.
Thank you, Shraddha. Thank you.
Yes, it was very, very nice. I just heard the last part of it, but it told me the whole thing.
Aha. Good. Isn't that's nice when that can happen. Great. I
Thanks
think
for that, Shraddha.
June, did you hand up?
Oh, yes. I love the way you brought every one of those characters alive for me. And I really felt that I was going down that mountainside to that fountain. It was so vivid. I admired that a lot. Thank you for the story.
Thank you. I'm glad you liked it.
Rachel, you want to go ahead?
Yes, I too really enjoyed that story. You are such a vivid, dramatic storyteller. You used your whole body. You got all of the characters and differentiated between them. And the parallelism when the old woman was worried about her husband and she went to the neighbor and he was too busy to help her. Your voice as the neighbor's voice was so expressive. And when he came to them and they said, of course we'll help you, but he was still so greedy that he overdid it and put himself back to being a baby. And it was just a wonderful example of the power of second chances and how you can learn from experience and do things over in a way that benefits everybody, that enriches your life and shows personal growth and helps the whole community. And you had such enthusiasm and wonderful pacing and just wonderful variety of voices, and that story just bubbled out from you. It felt so innate and organic.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Lakshmi, you want to go ahead? And then Marianne, maybe?
Yeah. Actually, right before I started hearing the story, I was a little disturbed. But when you started telling the story, I got so involved in it, I totally forgot, what I was, so upset about. And I totally went into the story. That is something which is very difficult to achieve today in this world where we have screens everywhere, where you can just connect with a person and you can get that person to with just your voice, and your, emotions and your actions. If you can get that person into the story, that's amazing. Elisa, I think you're just amazing. I was absolutely amazed by the
Thank you.
narration.
I'm glad we were able to relax, and that is what we hope with the story, that we become one with the story. We go right into it, and it does calm us down. Beautiful.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes, Marianne, you want to go ahead?
Yes, I agree with everything everybody said, Elisa. Your telling is beautiful, and it was a really nice story. It fit the theme. I loved the prospect of starting over, Especially I do that every time I go into a drugstore and pass the beauty products. I think, oh, I can be young again, but and I love the love that the husband and wife had for each other, because in modern days, if he was young again, he'd just be like, I'm off to the village to get a hot babe, young wife. But he even before she got young again, he was like, I'll take care of you, I'm going to stay with you. And I love that. So thank you.
Oh, beautiful, Marianne. Good. Great. Well, thanks, everybody. It was really fun.
Yes. Before we just move on to the next teller, I have one thing to add, Elisa. I must say, usually when there's a greedy neighbor in a story, somehow it ends up with something negative. And this was a very interesting one, that despite the greed, in fact, the greed helped him and everybody else in the story. So that was an interesting twist there. Thanks
Isn't
a
it
lot
great?
for that.
You
Yes.
never know, right? we are all being guided. Yeah. Oh, thank you.
One quick one, Marianne. Yes, quick one.
I just wanted to say that for some reason on Zoom, you can't hear like high pitch sounds. So I don't think anybody else could hear your bird whistle. So I don't know how to fix that when you retell that again.
That's a good thing. Well, I'm
There's
sure
an
Heather will
audio
be
setting that you need to look into. But what worked this time was every time the man wanted to listen to the music, each one of us wanted to as well, because we never got to hear it. So in a way, it helped with the story. But yes, thanks for pointing that out, Marianne. There's an audio setting that we need to look into when we're trying to sing at the higher
And
pitches.
I know that Heather will have an answer for that, because she's
yes.
my tech hero when it comes. I didn't even think that I should have that on, because it was such a short thing. But it wasn't very strong today because I have a cold anyway, so maybe it's just as well. All right. Thank you.
So that's okay. We now move on to the last teller of the day. We have Heather Forrest from New York, USA. We welcome you, Heather, here. And all of us are excited to listen to your story here. Please introduce yourself fully and share a story with us.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's wonderful to be here in India, even virtually. I have a story this morning, my time, that I've known for a long time, and it was born out of the birth of my daughter, who one day I held in my arms as an infant, and I thought, I need to tell her stories. I need to nourish her on stories that will build her strength as a woman. And I wanted to have a whole collection of these kinds of stories. And this was 40 years ago. And I began collecting tales of womenfolk, stories with sheroes that are strong in different ways. One way would be to have agency over their lives in the story. And so this tale from Norway entered my collection. It's a tale about a young shero, in this case, who's a farmer's daughter. And the tale comes from a time in history in Norway when young girls would not have any choice whatsoever as to whom they would marry, because their marriage would be arranged by their parents, or their father especially, and usually for the economic benefit of the family. But this young maiden decides that she doesn't really want to have her marriage arranged, and she's going to solve the problems of the family's economics in her own way. So listen into what happens when the local old man, who's the squire, the rich landowner who reigns over all the local farmers, decides that, well, he's so rich he can buy anything, even a bride. Here's the tale of the squire's bride, done as a musical piece. The old squire, he was a rich man, thought he could buy anything he wanted with money. But no, no, cried the farmer's daughter, he cannot buy my heart. I will not sell my heart. But daughter dear, her father said, The squire he will forgive our debt, and you're a maid not married yet. You would be wise to compromise and marry the squire. But no, no, cried the farmer's daughter. I have a different plan, father. I'll work the land. I am as strong as any man. I'll pay our rent with my toil and my sweat, but I will not marry the squire for his money. Well, you know, the old squire, he couldn't believe this. He said to the farmer, we'll plan the wedding anyway. See that your daughter changes her mind by the wedding day, or all of the debt that you owe you will pay to me straight away. I'll take your house, I'll take your farm. Oh, well, in that case, have no fear, her father said. My daughter, she's as good as wed, and a fine bride she'll be. I'll change her mind, you'll see. You invite the guests, I will do the rest, you'll see. A fine bride she'll be. And so they went ahead and wrote up a wedding contract. Oh, it was clearly described. The squire would receive the farmer's beautiful, very young daughter as a bride, and in exchange the squire would forgive all the farmer's debts. Signed and sealed. As the squire rode off with the contract for the girl in his pocket, as if she was some animal or chattel, he was thinking, well, even if she won't agree willingly to marry me, I'll send for her on the wedding day. When she sees all my riches on display, her heart will melt. I can't believe the farmer's foolish daughter could prefer a hard-working life to being a rich nobleman's wife. And so he went ahead and he planned a very elegant, sumptuous wedding. All the local landowners were invited. All the royalty received invitations and accepted. And on the day that the grand affair was to take place, his house was filled with wedding guests. The bridal chamber held a wedding dress. The squire was in his Sunday best when he called for his faithful servant. He said, go to the farmer's house, my lad. What's been promised will be had. Waste no time. Run there and back and just ask for what's been promised. So the servant, he ran to the farmer's gate. He said, my master won't wait. You better give me what you've promised him, for I must not tarry. Oh, well, I should tell you all that the farmer never mentioned anything about this arrangement to his daughter. And at this late moment, he was feeling a bit embarrassed to go and tell her face to face. And so he sent the servant in his place, saying, run to the meadow in there, my lad. What's been promised will be had. You'll find her working at the plough. Take her with my blessings to the squire. And so now the lad ran out to the meadow, and there he saw the farmer's beautiful daughter. She was plowing the field, sweating. She was working hard with favorite horse. She'd pay that debt with crops and her hard work. The lad ran up to the girl and said, excuse me, my master's in a hurry today. I must return without delay with what your father promised he would give him for the wedding. Wedding? Oh, what wedding? Huh? The squire's getting married? Whew, poor girl. And what could my father have promised the rich squire for his wedding? With all we tithe to the manor house, why, there's scarcely enough for us to eat in the winter. What could my poor father have promised that rich, horrible man for his wedding? I don't know. In all the bustle at the big house, you know, I never asked what I was to get. The squire just told me to go to the farmer's house. That's your father. Yes, and ask for what's been promised. And I follow orders, and so I did. And well, your father said just now, you'll find her working at the plow. Take her with my blessings to the squire. Aha. Suddenly, it all became clear. And she said, well, my dear father, at the plow, is it? Well, then, my father must have meant this horse. Take her with my blessings, please. I hope she satisfies the squire's needs. And so the lad jumped on the horse's back, and he rode like the wind back to the squire's house again. Leaving that horse out, he went in, saying, Sire, sire, I've got her. She's a beauty. She's standing outside the door. Outside the door? You left her outside, you fool. That's so rude, impolite. Don't leave her outside the door. Bring her up to the bridal chamber. The bridal chamber, sire? Do as I say, without delay. Lad, don't cross me. It's my wedding day. Well, whatever you say. Moments later, the lad came down the great stone steps of the fancy manor house, and he was patting his bruises, and he said, Sire, oh, sire, that was a very hard job you asked me to do. She was very wild and unruly. Sir, she kicked me. I had to tie her to the bedpost. You tied her to the bedpost? Oh, well, very, very, very lightly, sir. I'm beginning to suspect that she's special to you, sir. Oh, indeed. She's special and stubborn, but you did get her into the bridal chamber, didn't you? Oh, yes, I did, sir. I did just as you said. She's in the bridal chamber. Well, then, she must have seen the dress. Imported from Paris. The bodice is covered with rubies and pearls, laid out upon the bed with the veil and all the flowers. Oh, lad, come here. Confide in me. When she saw these beautiful things laid out, when she saw the dress, what did she say? Not much. Well, when she sees the wedding feast, maybe her heart will soften. Have her dressed in the wedding gown, and when you're done, bring her down. But sire, how can I? Get the handmaidens to help. Yes, sir. And so, with the help of every single handmaiden in the entire household, they did. Dressed the horse in a wedding gown, complete with a wreath and a floral crown. They tied little ribbons in her mane and her tail, and topped her with flowers and a wedding veil. Meanwhile, down at the wedding feast, the squire walked proud and tall through the hall. And suddenly he heard a big commotion out in the passageway. And he said, Hark! I hear her coming. Oh, my passions are ablaze. Gather round, my good people. Gather round. With the greatest of pride, I want to introduce you all to the squire's new bride. And as the great door swung open, a wild-eyed horse in a white wedding gown, complete with a wreath and a floral crown, was led kicking through the door. Well, the wedding guests' laughter shook the rafters. The squire gagged and gawked at what he saw. With that flowered wreath tumbling down over one eye, the horse trotted through the hole. Well, now many have told this tale since then. They say the squire never went courting again. La 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 la.
absolutely delightful, Heather. That was hilarious and that was amazing. Just thoroughly loved it.
Thank you.
I
Thank
love
you.
your choice of she-hero stories or sheroes. And I also love the way you handle them. It's never, the woman did this and the woman did that, and thoroughly loved it. Leaving it out to the audience now.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
Leena, please
love
go
the
ahead.
spark. Yeah, thank you. I love the sparkle in your eyes and the way you handle the guitar and then your singing and, bringing in all the elements that was 100% like we were just glued to it. I was looking into your eyes, the sparkles that, your eyes were saying it all. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. I think Heather, it's always a pleasure. It's a blessing to be able to watch you. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And is this? I mean, I've heard that you sing along a lot of your narrations. This is the first time I've had the opportunity to listen to you sing, and I loved it. It was just absolutely spot on, bang on. Thoroughly loved.
Oh, thank you. I don't always sing for everything because I think the voice, the speaking voice, has a musicality to it. So anytime there's syncopation or rhythm or dynamics or changing of voice characters, there's a music to it. I've been playing guitar since I was a child, so it's just part of what I take advantage of in my storytelling as a tool to help illuminate the stories, because the music is metaphorical to the tale. You might have noticed I had different musical motifs for different characters or different places. When the horse is riding, there's a certain melody that happens. There's a background kind of funny little doom ding doom 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 behind the conversations, and that allows me to stop and start and not have like a steady music that doesn't relate to the story. The music is always kind of a metaphor for the tale that I'm telling. I utilize it in lots of different ways.
Very talented.
So much to learn
Very
from you.
talented.
It's like one complete single woman production with background music, front music, singing, narration, action, all of it put together. Rachel, you want to go ahead?
Yes, I don't have much to add to that. Your craft is amazing. The story, it was captivating. And it was just so real when the father did not tell the daughter what was going to happen. And when the squire said, go ahead, he threatened the father, and the father said, oh, of course, go ahead, plan the wedding. And then how the daughter outwitted all of them, and how you just built the humor when the squire says, what, you left the the bride outside the room, and how did the bride take to the wedding dress? As an audience, it was absolutely delightful to visualize what was going on and to be there step by step in the scene, and under in as part of every single character. It was just wonderful.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, the key when I was working on the story was the pronoun, the place where the farce happens, where there's the misunderstanding as to who's out there by the door. When the servant says, she's a beauty, she's standing outside the door, I discovered if I said she, then you didn't know who the she was referring to, but the audience knows who's the she. The audience knows that it's a horse. The character in the story, the squire, doesn't know that it's a horse. So that's where the comedy of errors comes in. And I struggled with it while I was working on it to try to figure out, how do I juxtapose a character's understanding. And what makes it funny, I think, is when the audience is in on the joke, but the characters in the story are not in on the joke. And that's what was so delightful about this particular plot for me. So one change of word, she, and suddenly the whole thing could fall into place. The whole misunderstanding could happen.
Yes.
Wow. What an amazing, amazing performance, story performance. What a beautiful voice. Narrating a story is not an easy task, but strumming the guitar at the same time, keeping everything in place. Such a delightful performance. Wonderful story. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Well, I have to say that that I've been playing the guitar since I'm 14, and now at 76, my fingers don't kind of always cooperate. So I have to practice more now than I did when I was younger. But that it also gives motivation to be a tale bearer, which is I don't make up stories. I retell traditional tales in my own way. So I'm a carrier of stories, and to keep all of them alive so that I can tell them is really a challenge. There's so many stories that I've learned over the years that I've made that I have to sit down. I remember that story now, and I have to go find it in the landscape of my story mind. Where is that story, and what happened in it? And so going back and reliving it and remembering the chords. I don't read music, so I don't have any real way of documenting my chords. I forget them. And so and some of them I can't play anymore. My fingers just aren't as strong. So I've had to start remaking them. So I just make simpler versions, sometimes just using a bass line to go to the, rather than the big bar chord that I used to use. This finger doesn't do that anymore. So I've just adapted to my age, and the stories have grown up with me. That's all. And whether I can play I've also discovered that fancy is not better, that sometimes the simplest melody, the simplest musical gesture is what makes it very powerful. And I'd like to say that sometimes no music is even more powerful. And the story that we just heard about the bird singing, I thought, and I couldn't raise my hand. I was going to give a compliment to say, what a brilliant solution. This is a magical bird. This is a magical song. I don't know if I could make a song that would be equivalent metaphorically to the meaning of that song. And so to make it an invisible song, a silent song, was a brilliant choice. I think it's the best choice when the song is so magical that I could not rise to the magic in any simple pedestrian melody. So is a much better melody, because then everybody in the audience is imagining the most beautiful melody in the world, and it's a creative, pleasant experience. I imagined a beautiful sound. So I suggest that if there was any sound other than silence, it couldn't have been more effective. So silence and pause is actually one of the most important melodic elements in music. The stopping of sound makes the returning of sound even more powerful. It's also the key to comedy. So if it's a moment of silence, if you wait before the funny thing happens, the audience has a chance to think about what you might be saying. And if when you say the funny thing, it confirms what they were thinking, they laugh. Or if you say the funny thing and it surprises everybody, it makes them laugh. So it's not the funny thing, but the pause before the funny thing that sets up the expectation. And that's where the key to comedy is. It's the timing.
Wow, this complete workshop on a lot of things that you're touching. Thanks for that, Heather. I think there are a lot of people who want to speak to you. Elisa, you want to go ahead first?
Oh, I just wanted to. People said most of what I wanted to say, but I loved your story, telling us about how things have changed and how you've adapted to make it work. I think that's such a powerful lesson for all of us. But I also felt like your voice was still crystal clear and beautiful, and
thank you.
I really appreciated that. And And it was different to me, this story. I was kind of expecting that she would give the squire 3 tests and all of that happened so often in these tales. And I just loved that she was just working out in the field, doing her thing. And it all unfolded pretty much with a simple thought on her part. So that was really fun. Thanks, hon.
Thank you. Susan and then maybe Eric. Susan, you're on mute. Okay, I think while Susan is trying to sort it out, let's go ahead with Eric.
Well, I think Rachel had her hand up before me.
Okay, I'm on now, if I could go.
Yes, Susan, please go ahead.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm on my phone and it's very tiny little buttons to press. Hi, Heather.
Hi,
It's good
Susan,
to see
how
you.
are you?
I'm good. I couldn't help myself. I have to tell you that the image you made of the horse with the garland and the ribbons on the tail and the head, and then the garland falls over one eye. I mean, I could just see it so clearly. I love that because it made the horse ridiculous and it also made her a bride. It was cool. And I also loved how it wasn't just singing, because I've heard you sort of do both, or maybe I'm imagining it. There was a lot of narration in between, and it was a good lesson for me. I've tried to do not singing, but a story in rhyme. Heather helped me one time very generously, and lastly, just now when you told everybody about the importance of silence and in the singing and that was another demonstration of generosity for all of us. And I just really appreciate that you still have the heart of a teacher too. So thank you, Heather. It's good to see you.
Nice. Thank you.
Thanks.
I think
Yes,
Eric
Rachel.
was.
Well,
and
Rachel, you go
Shalini.
ahead, then I'll go.
Okay, sure. Rachel, yes.
One of the things I appreciated, Heather, was that you didn't give anything away about the characters. You let the story unfold the way it was going to unfold. So as an audience, we knew what was going on, and you had that twinkle in your eye and that twinkle in your voice. But you sort of, in a way, kept a straight face and let every character be themselves. And I also appreciate your teaching us what is behind the story. And I, for one, didn't notice the music was perfect. I didn't notice any need for anything fancier. And it was just absolutely delightful. And as you explain it, I'm understanding how you captured every nuance. And I too love the description of that horse. And also that the daughter, as was just pointed out, stays in the field and she continues to do what she's doing and doesn't worry about what's happening and lets fate take care of itself. And that the squire is so embarrassed, he never courts anyone else. He's been humiliated, and he is never going to try to buy anyone else and to buy love. So it's just so satisfying and such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure listening to you, Rachel, as well. The way you talk about every little thing that touches you in a story, it's a pleasure listening to you.
Thank you.
Yes, Eric, please go ahead.
The story was delightful and enchanting, but I want to speak about your use of music and your singing and the guitar. You are really a historic figure, Heather, because you have brought the heritage of folk music, USA folk music, into the storytelling world. Nobody else touches it like you do. You have fully integrated the spirit and the feeling of folk music, whenever I hear you sing and tell, I think of Judy Collins. What would have happened if Judy Collins would have become a storyteller? I'm just so happy that folk music lives through you, and that you're continuing to help folk music evolve.
Interesting. Well, I listened a lot to Judy Collins and Joan Baez and Joni Mitchell. Those were the women influences of my teenage years. And I listened to folk ballads all my early teens because that was the pop music of my day. The ballad that told a story was what influenced the way that I use music, except that in ballad singing, very often there would be a story that was told maybe with an interrupting chorus in the text of the song, and the music would just kind of like be a horse underneath it, and you just ride it, and it wouldn't change. And it seemed to me that sometimes it really was interchangeable. Sometimes some of the old ballads had words, and the music would be taken from another ballad and repurposed. And so the music and the story wasn't so much metaphorically integrated. And what I started to do was examine what kind of story do I want to tell. I didn't want to keep singing these old ballads with plot lines that didn't relate to me personally. So I started to take folk tales and make them into ballads so that I could tell the story through music that I cared about. I knew lots of stories in ballad about pirates and kings and queens, but what do I know about the Spring Hill mining disaster? I've never been at the bottom of a mine. I started to think about what other stories I could tell using this musical form that I'd been singing, replacing this. The very first one that I did was a Zen koan called Giving the Moon, about a little monk who's up on a mountain, and a thief comes along, and the thief wants all of his clothes because that's all he owns. And so he gives the thief his clothes, and as a little naked man sitting there in the moonlight, he just wishes that this thief could be gifted something better than just his rags. I wish I could give him this beautiful moon. Is the end of the koan, the story, the Japanese story. And I thought, well, that would make a good ballad. And I made it into a ballad, and I went down to the local tavern where they had an open mic, and I sang my little Zen koan, and nobody clapped. It was just a total failure. Did I give up? Nope. I just figured I didn't know how to tell it yet. And I just kept working on it, and I started by doing this kind of storytelling in living rooms with my friends. We all would sit around and sing folk songs to each other because that's what we did in those college days in the 60s. And it was through failure that I learned the most.
Lots of stories about growth and growing mentality, about the way you've got around using your guitar with age, and now about this little experience that you're sharing, Heather. So it's not just the stories, but also the story behind the story, which is talking about the growth, which is the theme for this year as well, maturity and growth. Yes.
Pratigya, I apologize, and Heather, I apologize. We have to close the session because we have another session next.
Oh,
Shalini, you want to say something, and then Pratigya, please close the session.
Nothing, just a big thank you. I've had the good fortune of listening and watching Heather in person. And whatever you may say, Heather, you just keep raising the bar. You just keep getting better at it. So whether your fingers reach the strings or the chords or no, you are spellbinding as always. God bless. Thank you for your story. Thank you.
Thank you, Shalini.
Thank you, Heather, with that beautiful feedback from Shalini, with that beautiful thought. I think we'll wrap up today's session. A big thank you to everybody who shared the stories today and the audience who loved them. Thanks a lot.